Picture yourself at 70, sipping tea in your favorite armchair, sunlight streaming through the window, your heart light with peace. Now imagine the opposite, a life weighed down by stress, guilt, and people who drain your spirit. Which future will you choose? As we age, life whispers a truth. Peace is louder than noise, and the people we surround ourselves with shape our joy. At 68, Grace learned this the hard way. Her golden years, meant for reflection and connection, were clouded by relationships that left her exhausted and unseen. Determined to reclaim her tranquility, she discovered 5 types of people to avoid, transforming her life into one of clarity and fulfillment. Her story inspires this guide, crafted for anyone over 65 who craves a life of meaning, free from emotional burdens. These lessons, rooted in wisdom and real experience, reveal how to protect your mental well-being by setting boundaries with toxic people. From subtle manipulators to relentless critics, you'll learn to recognize and distance them. Join our Elders Wisdom community by subscribing to embark on this journey and stay until the end. The final type might surprise you with its hidden impact. The guilt tripper, breaking free from emotional chains. Grace's journey to reclaim her peace began with a phone call that felt like a punch to the heart. Her cousin Linda, a lifelong presence in her life, called on a quiet Tuesday afternoon, her voice heavy with a familiar sigh. "I guess I'll manage alone since you're too busy," she said when Grace politely declined to run yet another errand, a task Linda could easily handle herself. The word stung, sharp and deliberate, painting Grace as selfish for choosing a moment of rest over Linda's demands. It wasn't the first time. Linda's subtle barbs, "I took care of you when you were struggling, and now look at you," had long tethered Grace to obligations that left her emotionally drained. Linda was a guilt tripper, wielding manipulation like a silent weapon, and Grace, at 68, was tired of carrying the weight. Guilt trippers don't need to shout. Their power lies in whispers, sighs, and calculated silences. They make you feel as if your very existence is a debt to be paid, as if your peace is a luxury you must earn by meeting their endless needs. Unlike overt aggressors, their approach is subtle, cloaked in the guise of care or familial duty. Linda's comments weren't angry outbursts but quiet jabs that lingered, making Grace question her worth. "Am I really ungrateful?" she wondered during sleepless nights, her mind replaying Linda's disappointed tone. Research underscores the toll of such manipulation. Chronic guilt elevates cortisol levels, increasing stress and harming mental and physical health in seniors. For Grace, this manifested as restless sleep, a racing heart, and a growing sense of resentment she couldn't shake. Grace's realization came slowly, like dawn breaking through a fog. Her life wasn't a ledger to balance for others, not for Linda, not for her children, not for the friends she'd known since her youth. She'd spent decades giving, raising a family, supporting loved ones through crises, always putting others first. Now, in her golden years, she craved tranquility, not turmoil. But Linda's guilt trips were a chain, binding Grace to a cycle of obligation that stole her energy and joy. The turning point came during a quiet moment in her garden, where Grace, tending her roses, asked herself a simple question. "Why do I feel I owe her my peace?" The answer was clear: she didn't. To break free, Grace knew she needed to set boundaries, a skill she'd never fully embraced. Guilt trippers thrive on kindness, exploiting the compassionate hearts of those who hate to disappoint. Grace was that person, always ready to help, always hesitant to say no. But she learned that boundaries aren't walls, they're gates, allowing you to choose who enters your life and how. Her first step was practicing assertive responses. When Linda called again, asking Grace to help move furniture, a task well within Linda's means, Grace took a deep breath and said, "I'm sorry, I can't this time." No explanation, no apology beyond the polite refusal. The silence that followed was uncomfortable, but Grace held firm, resisting the urge to fill it with justifications. Linda's response was predictable, a huff and a muttered, "Fine, I'll figure it out." But Grace didn't waver. To understand the pattern, Grace turned to journaling, a practice she'd once dismissed as frivolous. Each evening, she wrote about her interactions with Linda, noting how the calls left her feeling heavy, almost suffocated. The pages revealed a stark truth. Linda only reached out when she needed something, an errand, a loan, a sympathetic ear. There were no calls to share a laugh, no invitations to enjoy a coffee together, no moments of mutual joy. The relationship was a one-way street, with Grace as the giver and Linda the taker. This clarity was liberating, like shedding a coat that had grown too tight. Grace decided on a boundary. She'd call Linda once a month to check in, maintaining their connection, without opening the door to unscheduled pleas. If Linda called outside the schedule, Grace let it go to voicemail, responding later if needed. Over weeks, the guilt that once gnawed at her began to fade, replaced by a lightness she hadn't felt in years. Grace's transformation wasn't just about saying no. It was about redefining love. She'd always believed love meant sacrifice, that saying yes to others was proof of her care. But Linda's guilt trips taught her a harder truth. Love doesn't demand exhaustion. If someone makes you feel selfish for prioritizing your well-being, they're not loving you. They're controlling you. Psychological studies support this, showing that manipulative relationships can lower self-esteem and increase anxiety in older adults, as the constant pressure to please erodes personal agency. Grace felt this in her early attempts to set boundaries, when Linda's disappointed sighs made her second-guess herself. But she persisted, bolstered by a simple affirmation she repeated daily: "My peace is my right." Written on a sticky note by her bedside, it became her mantra, a reminder that she wasn't ungrateful. She was human, deserving of rest. To reinforce her boundaries, Grace sought positive connections that nourished her spirit. She joined a local walking group, where conversations were light and reciprocal, filled with shared stories and laughter. These new friends didn't ask for favors or guilt her into compliance. They valued her presence, not her utility. Grace also practiced a mindfulness technique to release lingering guilt. After tense interactions, she'd sit quietly for 5 minutes, breathing deeply, visualizing the emotional weight lifting from her shoulders. This ritual, simple yet powerful, helped her reclaim her energy, grounding her in the present rather than the past. Grace's story is a beacon for anyone in their later years. Your golden years are for living fully, not apologizing for your existence. Guilt trippers, whether family or friends, thrive on your kindness, but their needs don't trump your peace. If someone's words leave you feeling small, as if you owe them your time or energy, pause and listen to your heart. Love doesn't chain you, it frees you. Setting boundaries isn't selfish. It's an act of self-love, a declaration that your well-being matters. For Grace, saying no to Linda's emotional chains was saying yes to herself, a choice that lifted her spirit and lit the path to a life of tranquility. Your peace is a treasure, earned through decades of giving, loving, and enduring. Don't let guilt trippers steal it with their sighs or silences. Like Grace, practice saying no with clarity. Journal to uncover patterns, and surround yourself with people who honor your light, not dim it. Break free from emotional chains, and watch your spirit soar into the freedom you've always deserved. The constant complainer, guarding your energy from negativity. Grace cherished her community gatherings, the laughter, the shared stories, the warmth of connection in her small town. But one neighbor, Tom, cast a shadow over these moments. A fixture at every event, Tom's presence came with a heavy cost. Every conversation with him was a litany of complaints. His aching back that no doctor could fix, the noisy kids next door who never quieted, the weather's unrelenting cruelty. Too hot, too cold, too wet. Even on bright, sunny days, Tom found a cloud, his grumbling as predictable as the seasons. Grace, at 68, left their talks feeling irritable, her joy dimmed, her spirit sapped. Tom was an energy vampire, a constant complainer whose negativity drained her like a slow, steady drip, leaving her emotionally spent. Constant complainers don't seek solutions. They crave company in their misery. Unlike those who vent to process and move forward, complainers revel in their discontent, pulling others into their gloom. Psychological research highlights the toll of such negativity. Chronic exposure to complaints increases anxiety and depression in older adults, reshaping their perspective to see life as heavier, bleaker. Grace felt this shift after Tom's visits. Her usual optimism, nurtured through years of resilience, waned, replaced by an unease she couldn't quite pinpoint. She'd start the day hopeful, tending her garden or reading a favorite novel, only to feel unsettled after 20 minutes with Tom. His complaints weren't loud arguments or dramatic outbursts. They were a quiet erosion, a subtle theft of her emotional energy that left her questioning why her mood had soured. The realization hit Grace during a particularly dreary encounter. At a neighborhood picnic, Tom cornered her near the dessert table, launching into a monologue about his latest woes: the rising cost of groceries, his unreliable car, the incompetence of his pharmacist. Grace nodded politely, but her chest tightened, her smile strained. As he droned on, she noticed others drifting away, leaving her alone with his complaints. Driving home, she felt a heaviness, as if Tom's words had settled into her bones. That evening, she sat in her armchair, staring at the sunset, and asked herself, "Why do I feel so drained?" The answer was clear. Tom's negativity was a weight she'd been carrying, not because she chose to, but because she hadn't known how to set it down. Grace understood that energy is sacred in old age, a finite resource to be guarded fiercely. Studies show that emotional exhaustion in seniors can weaken immune function and increase stress-related ailments, making it critical to protect mental well-being. Tom's complaints were stealing her vitality, and Grace resolved to reclaim it. Her first step was to limit their interactions. At community events, she'd chat with Tom briefly, 10 minutes at most, before excusing herself with a polite, "I've got to catch up with someone." The phrase was simple, requiring no justification, and it worked. Tom might huff, but Grace moved on, joining livelier conversations that left her energized, not depleted. She also set a personal rule: no one-on-one visits with Tom at her home, where his complaints could linger like unwelcome guests. To cleanse the negativity after unavoidable encounters, Grace adopted a mindfulness technique. She'd sit quietly for 5 minutes, closing her eyes and breathing deeply, visualizing Tom's words as a dark cloud drifting away, her energy returning like sunlight. This practice, rooted in mindfulness-based stress reduction, helped her reset, grounding her in the present. She paired it with a gratitude ritual. After each session, she'd write 3 things she appreciated that day: her blooming roses, a kind word from friend, the warmth of her morning tea. This shifted her focus from Tom's gloom to life's beauty, reinforcing her resilience. Grace also sought positive connections to counter Tom's influence. She joined a book club at the local library, where members shared insights about novels, not grievances about life. Their discussions of love, loss, and human triumph lifted her spirit, reminding her that life held meaning despite its challenges. One evening, a club member, Sarah, shared a quote from a book: "You can't control the wind, but you can adjust your sails." Grace took it to heart, realizing she couldn't change Tom, but she could steer her own course. She also rekindled ties with an old friend, Martha, whose laughter and optimism were contagious. Coffee dates with Martha became a weekly highlight, filling Grace with joy that Tom's complaints could never touch. To deepen her emotional strength, Grace explored journaling, a tool she'd heard about but never tried. Each night, she wrote about her interactions, noting how Tom's negativity affected her mood. The pages revealed a pattern. His complaints weren't personal, but universal. He grumbled to everyone, from the mail carrier to the pastor. This insight freed Grace from taking his words to heart. Tom's discontent was his own, not a reflection of her worth. Journaling also helped her identify triggers, like Tom's habit of cornering her when she was alone. Armed with this awareness, she positioned herself near others at gatherings, making it harder for him to monopolize her time. Grace's journey taught her a profound truth: you're not an emotional landfill, destined to absorb others' darkness. Constant complainers like Tom thrive on shared misery, but you're not obligated to join them. Psychological studies emphasize the emotional contagion effect, where negativity spreads like a virus, altering your outlook. Grace felt this when Tom's grumbling made her notice flaws in her own life: her creaky porch, her limited budget. that she'd previously accepted with grace. By setting boundaries, she broke this cycle, preserving her perspective and peace. Your golden years are for savoring life's light, not shouldering others' shadows. Complainers steal your energy without remorse, but you can choose people who speak life, who see the sun even on cloudy days. Grace's strategy was simple but transformative. Limit exposure, cleanse negativity with mindfulness, and seek connections that uplift. She began each day with a silent affirmation: "My energy is mine to protect." This mantra, whispered as she watered her garden, became her shield, reminding her that her peace deserved guardians, not thieves. If someone's complaints leave you heavy, take a page from Grace's book. Politely step away, redirect your focus to gratitude, and surround yourself with those who inspire hope. Your spirit is a garden. Tend it with care, and let only those who nurture it linger. Guard your energy fiercely, and watch your days bloom with the tranquility you've earned. The user, reclaiming your worth from one-way streets. Grace always smiled when her nephew Mark called, his voice brimming with charm and warmth that felt like a hug through the phone. But at 68, she began to notice a pattern that dimmed her joy. Every call came with a request. "Aunt Grace, can you lend me $200? I'll pay you back next month," he'd say, or "Can you watch my kids this weekend? I'm in a bind." The promises were empty. The money never returned, and Mark vanished after getting what he needed, only to resurface with another plea. Grace was his convenience store, valued not for who she was, but for what she could provide. Mark was a user, treating their bond as a transaction, and each call left Grace feeling less like a beloved aunt and more like a resource to be tapped. Users don't love you, they love your utility. Their presence erodes your self-worth, making you feel like a tool rather than a person with a heart and history. Psychological studies highlight the toll of such one-way relationships, showing they can lower self-esteem and foster resentment in seniors, as the lack of reciprocity breeds a sense of being unseen. Grace felt this acutely when Mark skipped her birthday, a day she'd hoped he'd acknowledge with a simple call. Days later, her phone rang, Mark asking for gas money, his tone as warm as ever. Her heart sank, the truth dawning. He didn't see her, only what she offered. The warmth was a veneer, a prelude to his next request, and the realization stung like a betrayal. Grace's generous spirit had always defined her. She'd raised children, supported friends through hardships, and never hesitated to give. But Mark's pattern, taking without giving, made her question her worth. Was she only valuable for her wallet or time? The question haunted her, stirring a quiet anger she hadn't expected. Research shows that such dynamics can trigger emotional exhaustion in older adults, as the constant giving without receiving drains mental energy and fosters isolation. Grace felt this in her reluctance to answer Mark's calls, each ring a reminder of her diminishing reserves. Determined to reclaim her worth, Grace confronted the issue head-on. She knew she couldn't change Mark, but she could change her response. Setting boundaries became her first step. When Mark called again, asking for $300 to cover a temporary bill, Grace took a steadying breath and said, "I can't lend anything, but I can share budgeting tips if you'd like." Her tone was kind but firm, redirecting the conversation to non-material support. Mark's pause was telling. He mumbled a thanks and hung up, unaccustomed to her refusal. Grace felt a mix of guilt and relief, but the relief grew stronger with time, a sign she was on the right path. To solidify her boundaries, Grace reflected on her value, beyond what she could give. She began writing affirmations, a practice she'd learned from a friend. Each morning, she jotted down, "I am enough without giving everything," pinning the note to her fridge as a daily reminder. This small act, rooted in positive psychology, boosted her confidence, countering the resentment Mark's requests had sown. She also journaled about their interactions, noting how his calls followed a script: charm, request, disappearance. The clarity helped her see his behavior wasn't personal. It was a habit, one she didn't have to enable. Seeking mutual connections, Grace volunteered at a senior center, teaching knitting to peers. The gratitude she received, smiles, shared stories, small gestures of thanks, flowed both ways, filling her with purpose. Unlike Mark's one-way street, these relationships were a two-lane road, each person giving and receiving. Grace also practiced a grounding technique after Mark's calls. She'd sit quietly, breathing deeply for 3 minutes, imagining his requests as leaves floating away on a stream. This helped her release the guilt that lingered, reclaiming her emotional space. Grace's journey taught her a vital truth. Being needed isn't being loved. Users like Mark take until you're empty, leaving you to question your value. But you deserve people who pour back into you, who value your presence, not your purse. Psychological research underscores the importance of reciprocal relationships for mental health in seniors, as they foster a sense of belonging and worth. Grace felt this in her new connections, where her heart, not her resources, was cherished. Your worth isn't your wallet. It's your heart, rich with a lifetime of love and wisdom. Like Grace, say no to transactional bonds with clarity and kindness. Redirect requests to non-material support, affirm your value daily, and seek relationships that uplift. Users may charm, but their absence after taking reveals their truth. Choose those who see you, not what you can give, and let your golden years shine with the mutual care you deserve. The Controller, owning your freedom from unwanted direction. Grace, at 68, cherished her independence, a hard-won prize after decades of navigating life storms. But her daughter Emily's help cast a shadow over her freedom. When Grace planned a solo trip to visit a childhood friend in a nearby town, Emily's response was immediate. "Mom, it's not safe at your age." When Grace mused about selling her home to downsize, Emily frowned, saying, "You're not thinking clearly." Her constant advice wasn't support, it was control, cloaked in concern, undermining Grace's judgment. Emily was a controller, trying to steer Grace's life under the guise of care, as if her mother's wisdom, forged through years of resilience, was no longer trustworthy. Controllers rob you of autonomy, treating your choices as foolish or reckless. Their overbearing presence can erode confidence, with psychological studies showing that such relationships increase stress and foster dependency in seniors. Grace felt this keenly, infantilized by Emily's interventions. She'd navigated wars, raised 2 children through economic hardship, and rebuilt her life after her husband's passing. Yet Emily acted as if Grace couldn't trust her own mind. Each comment, delivered with a worried smile, chipped away at Grace's sense of self, leaving her second-guessing decisions she'd once made with clarity. The weight of being managed was suffocating, stirring a quiet frustration she hadn't expected in her golden years. The turning point came during a sleepless night, as Grace reflected on her life's triumphs, moments when her courage and intuition had carried her through. Why, she wondered, was she allowing Emily to dim that light? Controllers, even those who love you, often act from fear. Fear of your independence, fear of change. But their fears weren't Grace's burden to carry. She resolved to reclaim her freedom, starting with assertive communication. When Emily next questioned her travel plans, Grace met her daughter's eyes and said, "I appreciate your concern, but I've decided to go." Her tone was calm, not confrontational, affirming her choice without inviting debate. Emily paused, surprised, but didn't press further, a small victory for Grace's autonomy. To solidify her stance, Grace set a clear rule. She discussed major decisions with Emily, out of respect for their bond, but wouldn't seek approval. This boundary, simple yet firm, shifted their dynamic. Grace also adopted a daily affirmation, "My choices are mine to make," whispered each morning as she sipped her coffee. It anchored her confidence, countering the doubt Emily's words had sown. To further reinforce her strength, Grace joined a memoir writing group at the community center. Sharing stories of her resilience, surviving the loss of her home in a flood, starting a small business in her 50s, reminded her of her capability. The group's encouragement, unlike Emily's skepticism, was a balm, affirming that her voice mattered. Grace's journey illuminated a vital truth. You've earned the right to lead your life. Controllers may love you, but their need to manage you isn't your responsibility. Research highlights the importance of autonomy for mental health in seniors, as it fosters self-efficacy and reduces stress-related ailments. Grace felt this in her newfound lightness, her decisions unburdened by Emily's fears. She began seeking relationships that honored her agency, like her friendship with Clara, who cheered her travel plans and shared stories of her own adventures. These connections reminded Grace that her choices were valid, her wisdom intact. Your life is not a script for others to direct. Controllers, even well-meaning ones, silence your voice, but you deserve people who trust it. Like Grace, practice assertive responses, set boundaries that preserve your freedom, and surround yourself with those who celebrate your strength. Your golden years are for owning your choices with pride, not bending to unwanted direction. Stand tall. Your life is yours to shape, and no one else holds a pen. The critic, rising above judgment to embrace your truth. Grace, at 68, found joy in the simple things, her vibrant garden, her cherished blue dress, the quiet rhythm of her days. But her friend Clara, a sharp-tongued presence since their school years, dimmed that joy with her jabs. "You're wearing that dress again?" she'd quip, her smile masking the sting. Or, "Why bother gardening at your age? It's just extra work." Clara's words, passed off as humor, were criticism, each remark a subtle blow that made Grace doubt herself. Clara was a critic, always finding fault, never offering uplift. Her comments weren't constructive feedback, they were a burden, chipping away at Grace's joy like a persistent drizzle eroding stone. Critics create an environment of judgment, fostering insecurity. Research links constant criticism to lowered self-esteem and heightened anxiety in older adults, as it undermines confidence and breeds self-doubt. Grace felt this after Clara's remarks, hesitating to wear her favorite dress, its bright hue suddenly seeming foolish. She second-guessed her gardening, a passion that had sustained her through decades, wondering if Clara was right. Was it pointless? The erosion was subtle but real, stealing the ease with which Grace once moved through her days, her confidence fraying under scrutiny. The shift began one evening as Grace tended her roses, their petals a reminder of her resilience. Why, she asked herself, was she letting Clara's words dim her light? Critics, she realized, often project their own discontent, their judgments reflecting their struggles, not her worth. Grace decided to reclaim her truth, starting with self-affirmation. She wrote a list of qualities she loved about herself, her kindness, her green thumb, her quiet strength, and taped it to her mirror, reading it daily. "I am enough." This practice, grounded in positive psychology, rebuilt her confidence, countering Clara's barbs with self-love. When Clara next criticized her garden, saying, "It's messy for all that effort," Grace stood firm. "I love it, and that's enough for me," she replied, her voice steady, refusing to engage in debate. The response, calm yet assertive, silenced Clara's jab, setting a boundary without confrontation. Grace also adopted a mental technique. After critical remarks, she'd pause, breathe deeply for a minute, and mentally release the words, imagining them dissolving like mist. This kept Clara's negativity from lingering, preserving Grace's peace. To nurture her spirit, Grace sought affirming relationships. She joined a knitting circle at the community center, where members swapped stories and encouragement, praising her intricate scarves. Their warmth, unlike Clara's cold critiques, reminded Grace she was enough. These connections, rich with mutual respect, restored her sense of belonging, proving that relationships could uplift rather than undermine. You don't need to prove your worth to critics. Their words are mirrors of their unrest, not your value. Like Grace, affirm your strengths, respond with clarity, and seek those who celebrate you. Your golden years are for embracing your truth, not shrinking under judgment. Let critics keep their discontent. Your joy is yours to claim, and no one can dim it without your permission. Grace's transformation, from a life shadowed by toxic relationships to one of peace and purpose, shows that old age is a time to choose yourself. By distancing the guilt trippers, complainers, users, controllers, and critics, she reclaimed her energy, confidence, and joy. These lessons aren't about cutting people off, but about protecting your spirit. Each boundary, A firm no, a redirected conversation, a step back, is an act of self-love, honoring the woman you've become. You've carried enough in your lifetime: families, dreams, heartaches. Now, your energy is a treasure to guard, not give away. Grace's story reminds us that peace is your birthright, earned through decades of resilience. Which person will you set boundaries with to protect your peace? Join our Elders Wisdom community by subscribing to explore more ways to live boldly. And start today. Say no to one draining interaction, affirm your worth, or connect with someone who uplifts you. Surround yourself with light, and let your golden years shine with the freedom you deserve.